you talked about values for just a second, writing our values down and, not just going through the exercise. Why is it important for a family to have that conversation about what do we value?
I can take that, Katie.
Yep.
Katie will probably, we do a lot of yes anding improv when we're creating our workshops. So it's always a yes and, but values for me is like priorities. You can't have 20 priorities. If you have 20 priorities, you arguably have no priorities. And the exercise in figuring out both your priorities and your values is forcing yourself to like pick an answer. None of the words that you see on our value list are bad. It's
Right.
like honesty, integrity, adventurous, loyalty. These are all wonderful words and things to be, but you can't take we start with 72 words. You can't take 72 words and go to your kids or your spouse and say, we got to be all of these. That's kind of impossible. So we ask people to whittle it down, talk about why it's important to them, combine them as a family. And then also just with you'll hear this from our group all the time, like we're just trying to get it 80% there.
Yeah.
Your values can change. You can come back in next quarter and say, you know what, I actually think it's this. It's not intended to be rigid. It's intended to be like really, really healthy.
That's great.
Yes, and keeping on the sports analogy theme, which we seem to love more than the average group. If you think about your family as a team, my husband, my daughters, myself, you're thinking about how you can improve yourself individually and then how you can improve collectively, and establishing values for a team keeps you moving in the same direction. So that at any given moment, if we're thinking about 72 words, which direction of the field or the court are we running in? We're always more effective if we have a goal in mind. And values are goals, right? Just because one of my goals in my family is to be authentic or to focus on humor, or playfulness, doesn't mean that I'm always ready to do that, right? But in the big picture, if I'm making forward motion toward those values, then we're all moving in that same direction, and everything's better.
Yes, and
there we go.
There we go. I would add to that, as you're talking, it's really starting to come together a little bit more for me, in that you use the sports analogy, Katie, and there's no successful team that's ever won the Olympics without a coach. There's no successful, nobody's gone to the Super Bowl without a coach. And so really at the end of the day, what the TFM is, that process is that it's not an advisor, it's the family coach.
Yeah.
It's that, there's certain, the coach knows, hey, you know what, you might want to work on that jump shot. And so the TFM coach looks at it and says, hey, can bring it back around to say, remember that value that we talked about here? You know what, here's an exercise that you might want to think about as a family that you could take through. And
I think
I'm guessing at that. It's not guessing at it, but I know that the software and the modules that you have built inside of there, you have a path, but everybody's path is different. But there's a resource that's available for the family when they want to and need it, and the coach can see it.
Yeah, the coach sees stuff that just the players can't see when they're in the game.
Yeah.
Right. That's like, anytime a coach has pulled you off to the side and just like pointed something out, you're like, that's what's happening out there. Like, I couldn't totally see it. But to tie this back to the wealth and some of your clients, when you're talking about things that you want to pass on, values is very, very high on the list of most of the people that we talk to. And it usually manifests, like we hear it in different ways, just like, I've worked so hard. Hard work is what got me to where I am today. That is something I want my kids to have. Like, we hear that type of stuff constantly. And so values is one of the things that, like, with any of these exercises, it's not really about you, the person who's doing the exercise. If we're talking from the legacy perspective, it's about the people that are around you, the ones you might leave behind, the ones that are going to miss you. to have some way to be like, man, like let's not forget about how important hard work was to, my grandfather, my grandmother, my mom or my dad.
Yeah. For years, and I'm guilty of the, oh, it works so well, I stopped doing it routine. But for many years, I would ask clients, if you had knowledge, your values, and all of your assets, and you could only pick 2 to pass on to your children, I can tell you to a T, not one of my clients, no matter what they were worth, said the assets. It was always the knowledge and the values. But I didn't have a method other than throwing out some conversations without a process, without a coach, because I was always busy worrying about the assets too. And, and they're getting the assets ready for the heirs. We've done family meetings and we've had some really great conversations, but without a process.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I love about what you're doing with TFM is bringing in that process for people to be able to follow and to open up some conversations. And that, me and as the advisor, now it's like, it's doing that. I could care less about assets under management. We're a firm that believes in relationships under management. And our real goal is to strengthen the family or strengthen the business or strengthen the legacy. And it's like, yes, that's just how we get paid, is managing money and doing all of the planning work. But at the core, this is what's important. And I know it's important because I know it from my family. And if it's important, like you said, you can ask 1 million people that question, what's most important to you? At least 80-90% of the time, my gut would say that it comes up family. Not always.
Yeah.